السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome, brothers and sisters, to this event hosted by Luton Islamic Center. We have Prevent Watch here, and we have a regular Sheikh, Usamah Adh-Dhahabi. Today we're going to have a presentation by Prevent Watch first, and they're going to basically talk about the Prevent strategy. The Prevent strategy is basically the government's flagship strategy in dealing with terrorism on a societal and local level and extremism. It aims very specifically at Muslims, and Prevent Watch will elaborate on this, inshallah. So we're going to have about a 20-25 minute presentation from a caseworker from Prevent Watch, Brother Aleem, and then after that he's going to basically give us some advice on Prevent. He's going to give us an in-depth analysis of what they're about and the definitions and the reasoning behind it, and he's also going to give us some contact details for his organisation for if anybody's affected by Prevent or needs any assistance with it. And he's also going to look at some local case studies, like the cucumber case of the young boy who mispronounced the word cucumber, and as a result his parents were called into the school under extremism. So he's going to give us an in-depth analysis of that. And then our Sheikh Abu Usamah is going to give us some guidance from the Quran and Sunnah in dealing with these types of affairs, these types of trials on a more general and from more of an Islamic perspective. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Brother Aleem from Prevent Watch.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Firstly, I'd like to thank the brothers at Islamic Center for inviting me and organizing this event on a very important issue which is affecting the Muslim community wholesale all over the country. I'm from an organization called Prevent Watch, and what I'm here to talk about and discuss is the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act, specifically the Prevent provisions and the Prevent strategy. So what I intend to cover is talk a bit about Prevent Watch, how we came about and why we came about, the context in which Prevent exists, and also the case studies. The case studies is the most important part of the work that we do at Prevent Watch, because it's how people are actually affected. A lot of people read the Prevent legislation and a lot of people read the guidance documents, but the guidance documents doesn't give the whole story of how people, even in our community, have been affected. I'm Luton born and bred, I live literally up the road. Some of you here may know me, and there's been cases in Luton that you guys may have not be aware of that affected people within our own community, and I'll explain that further. So what Prevent Watch's whole aim is to support people impacted by Prevent. So if there's been an issue within any of the public sector in which a parent has been called in to discuss their children, or a student at university has been affected by Prevent, then we help them. So what Prevent Watch does, we offer a free helpline and support service for people impacted by Prevent. The details of the organisation, such as a helpline and the Twitter accounts and email address, will be given at the end. But what the helpline and support service does is ensure that your rights are protected and the rights of your kids are protected when you're affected by Prevent. So we investigate Prevent cases to ensure that due process and the rule of law is maintained. So what that means is there's specific laws already in place, such as safeguarding laws related to equality, which have to be adhered to when implementing any piece of legislation. So we ensure that somebody doesn't have Prevent applied to them simply because they're Muslim or simply because they're from a certain ethnic or religious background. We work with a number of different organizations to publish reports, briefing papers, and also stories within the media. Usamah referred to the cucumber case, which some of you may have heard of. The cucumber case was widely reported in about 400 media outlets, the biggest of which was like the BBC, The Guardian, the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mail. It's important to get these stories out there so people know that this is what's happening within their own communities, and also so the wider community understand that while the government talks about combating terrorism, this is how Prevent actually works in practice. We also raise awareness on Prevent and run run a number of training seminars and do presentations such as the one I'm conducting right now, and also publish toolkits on our website. I'm currently working on one to help masjids to adhere to the provisions which are going to come up and affect every single masjid and every single supplementary school, including, for example, Olive Tree Primary School in the next few months. I'm not sure if any of you are aware that the Extremism Bill is being published as we speak, and that's going to affect every single madrasa and maktab in the whole country. We also maintain a director of lawyers to ensure rights are protected. So what that means is, at Prevent Watch, we do as much work in-house as we can, because we work for free, and it alleviates any cost burden from the community. However, there's certain cases that we do not have the skill set to run. For example, if somebody is arrested, or if children are taken away and put under child protection laws. Therefore, we would pass it on to our legal director of lawyers, who are criminal law experts or family law experts. And finally, we support strategic cases with a legal fund to challenge the law and policy. Now, at the moment, I'll explain this later, but I've worked on about 160 of these types of cases. But that's a drop in the ocean, because we know in the period 2015 to 2016, 6,500 people have been referred to Prevent. So I work on less than 1% of cases. So our ultimate aim is to challenge the law within the court system through strategic litigation. So the context of Prevent. So the Prevent strategy was implemented into law via the Counterterrorism Security Act 2015. However, it's originally been enforced since 2007, when it was just policy. It was made in the aftermath of the 7/7 bombings. And its implementation was based on the acquiescence of the Muslim community. And the previous Labour government and the current Conservative government were very smart in saying there's acceptable Muslims here, we call them moderates, and there's other Muslims, we call them extremists. But what that leads to is normative Islamic aspects being called extremists. So if you have certain views on, major sins, or certain views on things related to politics, then you would be considered extremist. And the case studies I show will bear this out. There were two revised versions in 2015 and 2011 and 2015. The current form is now statutory. So what that means is all public sector workers have to follow it and have to implement it. That includes your doctors, your teachers, your local authority workers such as social services, the police. Everybody has to implement it. Originally, when Prevent was around, organizations received money, and again the government had this idea of calling people acceptable Muslims, i.e. good Muslims, and bad Muslims. The current Prevent budget is about £45 million, but they keep adding to it. So that means a number of community organizations have been given money to implement this strategy at community level, at grassroots level. Now, the definition of extremism, the whole of the Prevent strategy is based on this notion of extremism. Now, I'm just going to read this definition out, and then I'll break it down for you. So the definition is, our definition of extremism is the vocal or active opposition to fundamental British values, including democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, and mutual respect and tolerance of other faiths. We will regard the call for deaths of members of our armed forces as extremist behavior. This is a limited, practical, and inclusive definition, and I challenge anybody to say it's unreasonable. The fact is that definition is unreasonable, and I'll give you an example. Successive Conservative government ministers have been asked to defend their definition. Theresa May, who helped invent this definition, was on Radio 4, being interviewed by John Humphreys, when he asked her to give a practical implementation of this, and he said, if somebody says that they don't believe in homosexuality, are they considered an extremist? She could not give an answer either way. Other conservative politicians such as Sajid Javid said, when he was trying to defend the definition of extremism on Channel 4 News, he said, we all know what extremism is, and we know it when we see it. Again, none of these definitions mean anything, because when you're implementing it, nobody understands what they mean. And when you're giving 500,000 public sector workers training on Prevent and giving these ad hoc definitions, then it could apply to literally anybody, anyone here who doesn't go with the status quo. And this is part of the wider strategy to combat this notion of terrorism, and is one in which there have been a number of dedicated pieces of legislation since 2000. My academic background is in understanding terrorism law, how it affects people, and understanding the implementation of legislation. And when we hear the word terrorism, we always think of shock horror. We think of something like a 9/11 or some sort of innocent person being hurt or an innocent building. But as I can tell you from studying it, terrorism law is so wide in its definition that it could apply to anyone depending on who's yielding the law at that time. The cliche of one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter is a cliche because it's true. And I was speaking to Usamah before we started this, and he said I did my dissertation on the definition of terrorism, and he was telling me how wide it is because it could literally apply to anything and anyone depending on who's implementing it. Now the case studies. The case studies are the most important part of the work that we do. The case studies are the most important part of the work that we do. We try and help as many people who come forward to us on a daily basis. Even though it's my day of today, I got a call about 6:30 today saying, the police came to my house and they want to question my son because he watches Game of Thrones and he's got an email address that they said I wasn't aware of. And again, Game of Thrones is something that the world watches, and they're using that as an example of that he's being radicalized at home. Now, the statutory duty concerning prevent. Prevent has to be implemented by all of the public sector, so that's your local government, including social services, the criminal justice system, so that's probation services and prison services, education and childcare, including schools, colleges, universities, and nurseries, the health and social care, so you could be going to your GP and he might start asking these questions, and the police. Thus far, we've only been running this helpline since September 2014. In the first year, we worked on 96 cases, and that's a breakdown in the cases in the first year. If you see that the majority of our cases are from the education and childcare sector, we had 41 cases. From September 2015 onwards, we've had a greater influx in cases. So I've worked on 67 so far, and I project by the end of August 2016, I'll have worked on about 120. So that's 24 extra cases working on. Overall, we've had 163 cases. Now, education and childcare. So this first case is called the Eco-Worry case. I'm not sure if any of you are aware of it. It was widely reported. Essentially what happened was a 14-year-old Muslim boy was in his French class speaking about deforestation, and he used the word the eco-terrorism and the eco-warrior. Now, instead of discussing that issue, the teacher sent him to a safeguarding officer for the school, and the student was referred to prevent. But this is where the Islamophobic implementation of prevent comes to the fore. He said nothing about Islam. He said nothing about Islamic or Islamism or anything to do with Islamic politics. But the safeguarding teacher didn't ask him about his views on eco-terrorism. Rather, she asked him about his opinions of ISIS and his opinions of the Sharia and the opinions of the concept of Khilafah. So what we got involved, and essentially we put it to a stop and we took it to the courts because it was important to stop that, and they had to apologize. If you see on the caption, we got this report into The Guardian, one of the biggest newspapers in the country, and it's important to get that story out because this is one of the key prevent cases that are always used about the dodgy implementation of prevent. Now the second case is a terrorism book reading case. This is a Mohammed Umar Farouk. He's how many university students do we have here? One. Usamah, you're a university student, right? Okay, two, so we have two. So this student, three. Okay, so this student was reading a book on terrorism called Terrorism Studies. It's one of the premier texts in the field. He was reported to security by another lecturer who didn't know him, and he was subsequently interrogated about his views on Islam, his views on concept of Khilafah, and his views on jihad. Essentially what happened was, instead of him being referred to prevent and referred to the police, he turned on them and he complained. And it was the response from the university which was amazing. They said, we don't know what terrorism is, we don't know what extremism is, but the government has told us we have to implement this, so we have to implement it. We're very sorry for what we did to you. And alhamdulillah, it was quite a successful case that we managed to get that great apology from the university. However, Mahmoud Mafrouk is 34 years old. He's a mature master's student. He's got 3 kids. So let's take it down with if Prevent wanted to do what they wanted to do. Prevent would have got involved, and they would have said, you're radicalizing your children. They could have taken his children away from him and put them into local authority care because they thought they were radicalizing him. But alhamdulillah, we got involved, and Muhammad Mafrouk was very brave and very courageous to allow himself to get his story out there in the media, because he said to me, and I quote, he said to me, I don't want this to happen to other people's kids. Imagine if it was a sister who wasn't as brave as I was, her kids would have been taken away from her, and I thought it was a courageous and a Muslim thing to do to get this story out there into the media. And that's what he did. And again, it's another keynote case about the implementation of Prevent in universities. Now, so far I've talked about the implementation of Prevent on students, but this is one where there's an implementation of Prevent on a school teacher by his own colleagues. So a teacher was suspended based on his political views espoused on WhatsApp, and his views were not anything that were considered terrorist in any nature. He WhatsApped a article by Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald is one of the most famous investigators in the world. He's the person who wrote the Snowden story. And the article was called, Who is a Terrorist? Who is considered a terrorist? Again, I've written essays on who is considered a terrorist. The teacher was subsequently suspended and investigated. How we got involved, he was reinstated after investigation found no wrongdoing. Now, there's people who say that it was important to investigate him and ultimately we found no wrongdoing, so the process works. But you have to realize he was investigated, his reputation was put through the mud, and there was an emotional stress and well-being because he's the breadwinner in his family, and if he was suspended and then subsequently barred from teaching, that would have been a loss of income from a career that he spent years and years trying to get to over this vague notion of what an extremist is. Now, the case 94 is a cucumber case. This is a case that happened in Luton. So it's somebody from our community. And essentially, a nursery child was referred to Prevent for mispronouncing the word cucumber. He says it as a cocoa bomb. As a nursery 4-year-old would say, the teachers interpret it as cocoa bomb, and they're the people who put the word bomb into the conversation. So again, we wrote letters, and the nursery apologized and found there was no wrongdoing. However, it was the manner in which they treated the mother. The mother said she felt like a criminal and like she was interrogated, and her nursery, the nursery teacher said to her when they were having a discussion, the mother said, well, I'm not a terrorist, I don't look like a terrorist, I don't act like a terrorist, and her reaction was, well, Jim Savile didn't look like a paedophile either. And she was treated like a criminal after her 4-year-old mispronounced the word. Even if he said cocoa bomb, right? He's 4 years old. He learned things like explosions and stuff from watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers, and he's 4 years old. It should be taken with a pinch of salt because they're so young. But unfortunately, this is the manner in which Prevent's being implemented. When you give public sector workers en masse a sledgehammer to implement Prevent, when what you need is a scalpel, this is what will happen over and over and over again. Now, what I'm going to discuss now is again in the education sector, but how they're treating curriculum, homework, and class discussions. Now, Olive Tree obviously is a primary school which has to adhere to the DFE's regulations, but Prevent has affected all aspects of education and life, and this can be seen in the homework that's given, the class discussions that take place, how the curriculum is implemented. So this is a piece of homework that was given to primary school students. Now there's one on jihad, to struggle in the way of life. Okay, and this is a really obscene form of entrapment of students to see how they think. But I want to draw I want to draw everyone to the second one, where it says, God has a purpose for me. There are two kinds of people in this world, those who are for the truth and those who are against the truth. Only one religion is correct. It's okay to marry someone of the same sex. The only acceptable religion is my religion, and it's better to be a dead hero than to be living passively. And they asked them to rank from strongly agree down to strongly disagree. Now, anyone here who's got even the most limited Islamic education can understand that a number of those questions relate to Aqidah, a number of those questions relate to major and minor sins, okay? And the idea behind this was to say, if I said to me, if I wrote that God has a purpose for me and strongly agree, I think everyone here would agree with that. And if somebody said there's only one religion is correct, I think everyone would strongly agree with that as well, because that's the point of religion. And again, it's okay to marry someone of the same sex. We know what that regards to, and it's to do with a specific major sin. But had the students answer strongly agree on a number of these questions, they would be subsequently referred to prevent. Now, what happened was we got involved and we had to put a stop to this survey being given to students because the parents were not told that this was taking place, and there was no consultation from the parents. So alhamdulillah, a number of parents within Waltham Forest got together and we helped them to make sure that this survey wasn't being given out. By assure you that this is happening up and down the country, maybe it happens to schools in Luton, that they're asking these types of questions because they want to see what level of extremism you're at, and also the devoutness to your faith. Because it would appear that if you're devout to your faith, they would call you extremist, based on how they're implementing it and based on the types of cases we're getting. Now, these case studies from the local government. So essentially what happened was, there was a visit from social services based on claims that the mother and father apparently had about foreign policy, and the Prevent office got involved. The social services said that the children were being safeguarded problem. There was no problem at the house. They didn't have any dodgy tapes or dodgy CDs. Yet the Prevent officers still continue to harass the mother. Now, the mother eventually sought legal advice to get an injunction against the police because they were continually being harassed. Now, case studies in the health and social care. Now, most of my cases are from the education sector because teachers are whipped up into hysteria and very scared about, having a Bethnal Green type situation of people going off to Syria. Doctors and nurses simply do not have the time to implement Prevent, but we do have a few cases from the healthcare sector. And essentially, an individual went into the GP for a leg problem. And after the GP treated him, he started asking him about his political views. He says, where do you study? He goes, I go to college and I study economics, history and politics. And then the GP started asking about the patients about opinions on ISIS and opinions in the Middle East and opinions of concepts of governance to do with Islam. And he said to him, look, you've helped me with my leg problem, I'm not going to answer these questions. And he left because he knew where this type of conversation would lead to. Now, Chapter 7 is a chaplaincy case. Now, the chaplaincy case is very important. I don't know if there's any NHS chaplains in the audience at the moment, but essentially there was a chaplain for an NHS trust in South London, and he was dismissed because he was campaigning against the CTS bill at that time, and he was sharing platforms with a number of different individuals and organizations. They said to him, you can keep your job if you go on the Prevent training. He went on the Prevent training, but he was still dismissed. Now, one has to look at why was he dismissed. Was it because he was going on the pulpit and doing anything nefarious or doing anything illegal? No, he wasn't. All he was doing was going against the status quo of what the current status quo is regarding issues related to foreign policy. And he subsequently lost his job from the NHS trust as a chaplaincy. I'm cognizant of the time, so I've only got a few minutes left. I would encourage everyone to take these details down. These are our 2 helpline numbers, and we have caseworkers who will help you if you've been affected by Prevent. We've also got an email address which is contact@preventwatch.org and a website which is preventwatch.org, where you'll be able to see everything that we do regarding our work. And finally, we have a Twitter account. If you're on Twitter, then by all means follow us and then get any information, updates, and the latest type of work. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair, Aleem. So from what I understood from that, Aleem, is that now it's law, it's a legal obligation for school teachers, college teachers, even nurses to actually snoop on the children, and if they hear anything which they consider to be extreme, which their understanding leads them to, they have to report that.
Yeah, essentially, yes, it's like that. They have to start a chain of events, a process that they have to adhere to. The Q&A will bear this out more, but essentially, the manner in which Prevent is implemented, it's very cloak and dagger. They're not transparent at all. They don't give the full facts. A lot of the time, they don't even tell the parents that they're implementing Prevent. For example, there might be a time when you're going to the school gates and they're suddenly asking you about what your son or daughter learns at home. At that moment, you know they're trying to implement Prevent. We have to realize that, and it disheartens me to say this, but we have to realize that the relationship between parents, students, and teachers has changed. Everything's become very much securitized, and we have to understand that all these friendly meetings and all these informal chats no longer exist. They are building a file on you and your son to see if you are radicalizing them. And instead of burying our heads in the sand, what you do is engage in the process, but engage in a manner that protects yourself in a very formal manner via letters. None of these informal chats, because those informal chats are being logged by them, which they won't tell you.
Thanks. Okay, we'll pass it on to Sheikh Abu Usamah. We'll go on till Isha, 10:20 roughly, and then afterwards we'll have Q&A for both the speakers.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi, amma ba'd. First, at the top of the list, I think that the people who are behind and responsible for this type of presentation, they should be acknowledged and praised, even because these are from the contemporary issues that the Muslim community needs to be engaging themselves in today. With as-Salafiyya being al-Islam and al-Islam being as-Salafiyya, I think that our communities, as-Salafiyya and our dawah, we are failing because some people are preoccupying the minds of the community with what this sheikh said and what that sheikh said and what this sheikh said about this one and that one, and we have some real issues on the table. I'm talking about big fat fish to fry. You know this issue about should you move your finger, not move your finger? I'm not one of those people who says, that's a small issue. This issue may get you into Jannah. But when we prioritize, there are other issues that are bigger than this, more important than that. So I'm not going to minimize any aspect of the deen, any mas'ala in the deen. So don't get it twisted and get it misunderstood. What I'm talking about is importing the battles that sheikhs have overseas with each other. This thing is retarded and asinine. How do I keep my teenage kids on this deen? How do I do that? The legislation that's being put into effect, how do we deal with that? Real issues. So I want to just commend and acknowledge that the brothers here at this masjid putting on this type of program. It is one of those things that we said, alhamdulillah. But if you look in the audience, the Muslims are not here. Even from this community, Luton, the brothers who are on this down this deen. This particular issue is one of those critical issues. I gave a khutbah about this Prevent, some of these situations, cucumber, the cooker bomb, and I gave it in a very big masjid in Birmingham. Masjid that gets about 4,000 or 5,000 people every week for the khutbah to Jummah. And yes, the khutbah was hot, but I call it how it is. I'm against Daesh and I'm against all this terrorism, but at the same time, I'm going to criticize the foreign policy of these people. And that's part of the guideline that I want to tell you about. Anyway, after the khutbah, that particular masjid, they didn't put the khutbah up online. They didn't put it online because it wasn't politically correct. So I had to go to a masjid where I see some brothers who are here. Masjid is Milton Keynes. and I gave the same khutbah there. Then I decided I'm going to continue to give this khutbah for about 3 or 4 more weeks across the country, trying to raise the awareness of the community that this is no joke, this is a serious issue. The other thing that I wanted to mention, Ikhwani, is, and I need you really to stick with me on this issue, the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us something that we have to carry with us forever, to the best of our ability, especially living in this society where, you know, people are always looking for the wow factor. Salvation is not always in the wow factor, and success is not in the wow factor, the thing that blows your kufi off your head. The sheikh can give a dars, can give a khutbah, and it didn't blow your socks off. It didn't blow them off. But what was in that talk were treasures of knowledge. He said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, la tahqiranna shay'an min al-ma'ruf. Don't consider anything that is ma'ruf. Don't consider it to be insignificant. Anything that is ma'ruf, it is the haqq. Don't look at it as being insignificant. Opening up the door for someone, smiling at someone, anything. So he told the people, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to fear the hellfire, even if it is with half of a day. Now stay with me now, half of a day. So some poor lady came to the house of Aisha, radiyallahu anha, knocked on the door and said, hey, we are hungry. I have these 2 daughters. Can you help me out? She said, okay, hold on. She went inside, looked far and wide through the house. All she came back with was 1 date. 1 date. She gave the date to the mother. The mother split the date in half. Gave one to one daughter, the other to the other daughter. She told the Prophet what happened, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet said, that date is going to be a hijab for that mother from the knot of Jahannam, and for you too. 1 date is going to be a hijab for the mother who split it and made that sacrifice for the kids, and also for you too, Aisha, 1 small date. So don't look at anything that is the haqq and ma'ruf, like putting on this type of program. It doesn't have to necessarily have the wow factor where we leave this place and no, this is a serious issue. If you have children, they're in Birmingham, Green Lane Masjid, with another organization, came up with 900,000 pounds last year to help the Syrian people. 900,000 pounds just to purchase flour. That's it. That's very small and minuscule. It's just a drop in the ocean when you compare it to how many people are displaced. But when you hear 900,000, that's a lot of money to us. But in terms of the overall problem of Syria, it's a little bit. But maybe that 900 grand and just the 1 kalima that you gave there, or the 10 pounds that you gave, it'll get you into Jannah. So this issue right here, putting on these types of topics, this brother, he didn't use 1 ayah, he didn't use 1 hadith. But what he said, this stuff is serious. Because you could get your kid taken away from you for some nonsense. Now, as it relates to the guidelines of dealing with this prevent, and a lot could be said. I feel that the brother, without criticizing anything like that, but sometimes when we talk the way our community is, how many people here in the university? We get 3 people, that's all Luton, only 3 of your shabab in the university. But this is some of the challenges that we have, the education and how we look at education in this country, our community. Anyway, if he just comes and gives you some of the examples of what this ridiculous issue is trying to do, I think our community will get a better appreciation for the seriousness and the danger that we find ourselves in. Serious and dangerous. When the Charlie Hebdo fiasco happened, okay, we're going to clear and free ourselves from that, because that's the sunnah, that the Muslim frees himself from an action that a Muslim may do. He doesn't totally free himself from his Muslim brother, but he frees himself from that action. That's our religion. But I'm not going to put on my social network a French flag. I'm not going to do that. It's a slap in the face of all the people who were murdered from Algeria and all of that stuff, from other parts of Africa. The young kid is in his classroom and he put forth a legitimate question. And the legitimate question was, why is it that when Charlie Hebdo happened, we stood up 2 minutes of silence out of, showing our solidarity and showing that we're against that. But when the kids were killed in Pakistan, when they were killed in Pakistan by those monsters who went into the madrasa and killed them with some of the students. Why doesn't the dunya show the same type of sensitivity? The teacher said, you're potential extremists. We have to report this kid. We have to report this kid. And what he was saying was something that, hey, we should have an environment of robust discussion where the child, the teenager, you're going to talk to his mind. You're going to talk to his sensitivities. Nobody got in trouble for that. A Muslim father was passing out papers. He went and made it his business to print out some flyers to show Halloween is haram. It's not permissible for Muslims to do Halloween. He stood at the door of the madrasa, handing it out to the Muslim parents. They called him in. What are you doing? What are you doing? He wants to go under the radar. So he didn't want to get in trouble anymore. He was just giving dawah light and expect to have that type of backlash coming his way. When World Book Day came, World Book Day is where the kid takes some character out of a book and he goes to school dressed like that character. So you could go to school dressed like Batman. You could go to school dressed like Robin. You could go to school dressed like Superman, whatever. His son went to school with a cape on, with a turban on, with a plastic knife, mind you. A little plastic knife. And he went to school with those shoes that turn up. The teacher said, oh, wow. Who are you? You Aladdin? Alauddin. Are you Aladdin? You Aladdin? He said, I'm not Aladdin. I wouldn't be that. Aladdin is a liar. Aladdin is a thief. Aladdin is this. The story is like that. He's telling them the story. Aladdin, I'm not Aladdin. He said, I'm Salahuddin. And he said, you extremist. And they raised his issue. They raised his issue. Now we all have secrets, Ikhwani. Everybody here has secrets. Everybody. We have good secrets and we have bad secrets at home. From the good secrets is, my wife attended your sister's wedding. And at that wedding, there was some videos taken showing the women dancing without hijab and so forth and so on. So these people come down, knock my door down, and they get my videos and they get my computer and they look into my stuff like that, depending upon what they deem is a serious issue. So they're going to compromise my right to privacy. Stuff is serious. And there are many examples. So what the brother said today is true. It is something that is relative. It is what they consider to be terrorism. The kid from Manchester, he didn't want to wear the Manchester United jersey, the kit, which is red, a color we don't like in Islam. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited us from wearing something that was strictly red. So when he refused or he showed his lack of desire to wear red, they asked him why. He said, well, the kit has a cross on it. It has red, and they're the red devils. I don't like the devil. The shaitan is my enemy. You're an extremist. You're a possible radical kid. So where does it stop? Where does it stop? Palestinian, one kid, he was wearing one of those bands to encourage people, donate to the Muslims in Palestine. That was created from dhulm. And they're still being oppressed. So donate. Our Muslim kid goes to school. Inside of his DNA, his blood, that's running. He's saying, I love Mecca, I love Medina, and I love Palestine. Mecca and Medina, my parents have been there, I'm connected to that. All I know about Palestine is people are killing Muslims. So he goes to school to heighten the awareness of the people. And just because of that, wearing this, he's a possible extremist. That's my kid, that's your kid. Normative Islam is under attack. To the degree, as I told you, to the degree, in Birmingham, big masjid, a masjid that is in front of the curb, a masjid that's always dealing with the authorities, always inviting the authorities, come, we are open, we have nothing to be afraid of, trying to show them, we are here trying to help society. They're doing everything they could possibly do to show these people, we are not the people to be afraid of. Stop cutting our knees out from under us. But when we gave that khutbah about the dangers of prevent, they were afraid to put the khutbah up. Because you have to be politically correct. Now we come to a few issues. Number one, the Prophet ﷺ saw Anas ibn Malik playing in the street with some of the kids. He said, Anas, come. Anas ibn Malik said about himself in another hadith, I took care of the Prophet for 10 years, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He came to Al-Medina, I gave him khidmah for 10 years. In that 10-year period, never did he say to me, why did you do this? Never did he say to me, why didn't you do that? And as I always say, I can't imagine that. Because I'm going to say to my kid, why did you do that? Why did you put the gum in your sister's ear? Why did you do that? And why didn't you do it this way? 10 years. He never said this or that. His mother brought the boy to the Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, Anas is intelligent, let him take care of you. She took him to the Islamic school, she took him to the sheikh to get the tarbiyah directly from the fountain of the Sunnah. One day, the Prophet walked by and he saw Anas playing, come, stop playing, come. He told him, I want you to go and do this and this and this, and told him a secret, and Anas said, hurry up. And his mother was waiting for him. Anas went and he took care of what the Prophet sent him to do, the errand. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he came home, the mother saying, Anas, you're late. Where you been? She said, the messenger of Allah sent me on an errand, and he told me not to tell anybody. It was a secret. It was his secret. This is his mother. His mother said, no, you're going to tell me. What did he send you for? What was the errand? He said, Ummi. It was the secret of the Nabi. He told me, don't tell nobody. The mother, having deen taqwa, she said, okay, don't tell anybody. Hadith is in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. And from the benefit of the hadith, it goes to show that the parent, the one who is responsible for the kid, you have to be in your kid's ear, in your kid's heart, in your kid's mind, telling them, don't go out of this house telling people about what's going on in your house. Because you have good secrets, that's not the business of anybody else. My son, my daughter, goes to my wife's sister's house, my wife's brother's house, and they're quizzing him. For an example, hey, what do you guys have? What do your father do? What do your mother do? If my kid comes back and tells me that about his khala or his khal, I gotta say, you can't go to their house anymore. Because that's not their business. And that's my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law. Your child has to, in this day and time, be on top of this stuff. Because if they go to school and they're not sensitive and aware and switched on about, look, some of these people are not having our best interests at heart, you will get in trouble. So as a father, and you as a father, the days are long gone where our fathers used to just go and work and leave us like that. You have to be in the ear of your child. Your family has to be together more than what we're doing to go over this kind of nonsense that's going on. So that they don't catch your kid out. Catch him out like that. A kid wants to say cucumber, and the kid made a mistake and said bomb. The kid wants to say in just a normal dubs, we live in a terrorist. He said we live in a terrorist house. Terrorist house. He meant to say we live in a terrorist house. Terrorists. It's the responsibility of the teacher to weigh the situation. But because some of them, and I have to say this because it's part of the guidelines, I am not with those people who believe everything is a conspiracy. Everything is a conspiracy. When they killed the soldier here in London, on the streets of London, that's a conspiracy. Look at his hand, the blood is like that, the knife is like that. Conspiracy. I believe that they're conspiracies because the Quran and the Sunnah establish that. إِنَّهُمْ يَكِيدُونَ كَيْدًا وَأَكِيدُ كَيْدًا. They are plotting and planning, and Allah plot and plan. يَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. Many ayat. يَسْتَخْفُونَ مِنَ النَّاسِ وَلَا يَسْتَخْفُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ وَهُوَ مَعَهُمْ إِذْ يُبَيِّتُونَ مَا لَا يَرْضَى مِنَ الْقَوْلِ لَا خَيْرَ فِي كَثِيرٍ مِنْ نَجْوَاهُمْ. There's many conspiracies. So we're not going to reject and deny that they're conspiracies. But everything is a conspiracy. Everything is a conspiracy. Don't be like one of those people. Everything that happens. So part of the guideline that I would say to this community is we have to be fair and just. And we have to acknowledge there is a radical extreme strand in our community. This is a fact. We have radical people, we have extreme people. Some are radical extreme for different reasons. Some of them because they're just looking to be guided and they hooked up with the wrong people. If this prevent was serious, if it was serious, then there are some things we would agree with from the policy of the government. For an example, we're not going to bring to this country, the government won't allow someone to come to this country to be an imam who doesn't speak English, because he has to speak the language of these youngsters. He's speaking Arabic, Urdu, and they're speaking another language. I support those types of initiatives, because when a kid is sitting there, he doesn't understand that imam, so he goes down the street and he sits with someone who's talking all of that nonsense. Next thing you know, he's doing something crazy. He's doing something crazy. So I think some of that, we have to be fair, we have to be just. Not everything is a conspiracy, but I believe this is a conspiracy against us. If it's about eradicating extremism, why aren't Sikhs being pulled up on it? Why aren't Hindus being pulled up? BNP people, India, why is it just the Muslims? And as the brother said, when did the initiative, when was it put into effect? It was put into effect after something Muslims were accused of doing. Now, this number that the brother gave, I don't know, I think you said 6,500 cases. That's a lot of cases. If that's the sum total of the cases, you know you're going to have to break it down. How many were 4 years old to 10 years old? It's a lot of people. Kid 4 years old can't pronounce words correctly, and you pull him up for saying cucumber, cocoa bomb, cocoa bomb. So I do believe it is a conspiracy that is after us, which brings me to the other issue. How do we tackle it? How do we deal with it? We deal with it like what this masjid is doing right here, being in the middle. As I mentioned many times in this masjid, Ikhwani, we have to be wary, be careful of being of the two extremes. One extreme is the one who wants to be rough and tough and kill and maim and just do crazy things, like some of these hardcore people out there. Daesh, Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, Shabab. These people even hear these dawah groups that are extreme in what they're saying. And the other extremity is the one who's apologetic and he wants to acquiesce. He can't say the word jihad, so he calls it the J word. He can't tell us what our religion is in its proper context, in its proper place, without apologizing. Tomorrow I have to give a dars tomorrow, inshallah, in Bedford. We're doing 40 hadith about Imam al-Nawawi. That's the book that we're going to start off the hadith with. The new student is going to start his hadith. So when we come to the hadith of the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in the book, we come to the hadith, al-jihad dhurrat al-sanami. Al-jihad is the peak of the matter in Islam. We're just going to jump over that chapter. We're going to jump over that hadith because it's not politically correct. The J word, Hey, you don't have to be apologetic. The Prophet ﷺ heard about those three men who came to his house and he said, I'm going to fast all the time and pray all the time. I won't get married to the women. So they were avoiding doing things that were from the Sunnah. One of the companions, his name is Uthman ibn Mad'un. Uthman ibn Mad'un. He was well known for being a zahid. Came with ikhlas. Ya Rasulullah, give me permission to castrate myself. For the young brothers, castration, you gotta go home and ask your dad. What does that mean? Can't tell you what that means right here. Can you imagine the level of commitment he had to ibadah to want to get castrated? Prophet said, we weren't sent for that. I wasn't sent with that religion. Allah said, this is the monotheism that they invented on themselves. We didn't reveal this. We didn't make that wajib. Amr ibn al-As, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, fasting every day. Fasting every day. So if you do something too much in the religion, you have ghulu, you went overboard. But you have to understand, extreme in our religion as well. And the Islamic narrative is the one who's not doing enough as well. The one who's apologetic, the one who's not praying, the one who's not wearing hijab, the one, you're also an extremist. You have to be in the middle. So in the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Rasulullah sat before the people, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He drew a long line, a straight long line, which is the balance. He said, this is the sirat of Allah that's mustaqim. This one is the straight one, the religion of Islam. In its totality, its context, its time, its place, its rules, its regulations. Then he drew long lines to the right, lines to the left, and he said, these are the subul. These are divergent lines. Some going that way and some going that way. All of them not going to the right, and all of them are not going to the left, but they were off the center. So anytime the person is off of the center in Islam, he's off the sirat al-mustaqim that we make dua for, this is a problem. So we should stop falling into the trick of the language. The language is the one who's doing rough. He's too rough. He's an extremist. Not in our religion. He's not the only one who's extreme. Homosexuality is an extremism. Your lack of justice is extreme as well. You people are extreme. So we have to put our voice out there, like in this masjid. We can't expect the whole community to do it, but at least let your masjid be a masjid. Let your voice be the voice of moderation, trying to be in the balance. Although everybody is not on board with you. Let this masjid say that. You guys, this government, you're not helping us. You're not helping us to de-radicalize our kids, to stop them from being extreme. With all of the stuff that's going on, you cut our legs off from under us with these types of initiatives. Prevent. And then when you look at it, political scientists, when they look at this stuff and they study it, it's just nonsense. It's just nonsense. It's not something real that is going to do anything that's effective in terms of trying to get rid of what they're claiming they're trying to get rid of. Lastly, Ikhwani, in this particular community here, what I would say is, whatever the case may be, at the end of the day, this is the deen of Allah Azza wa Jalla. This is the deen of Allah is going to reign supreme. It's going to prevail. And in saying that, you know I could get in trouble because I said Islam is going to reign supreme. I believe as a Muslim that the Nabi of Islam, the Prophet of Islam, he mentioned sallallahu alaihi wasallam that Allah showed him the east and the west. And he said that his ummah is going to conquer everything that was shown to him. That's theology. I didn't tell anybody to go out and establish the khilaf all over. I didn't say that. I said that that's what the Prophet said. So we believe in that. I'm an extremist for believing in that. Then why is the Christian not an extremist for saying that Jesus died for our sins and you can do whatever you want to do as long as you believe Jesus died for your sin, you're going to go to Jannah? Because it's not fair. Putin went to a place in Russia these days. He's there now. It's all over the news. He went to a place, a monastery, where they're celebrating 300-400 years of this monastery. There's complete separation between men and women. Women can't go in to participate in the festivities and the occasion. When they mention this on the news, they mention the fact that women can't participate, and it's so simple and easy. It's like it just will go over your head if you were not a Muslim. As a Muslim, you're going to say, why is it that when we separate in the classroom, like what happened in Birmingham, they did this thing called Trojan horse. The regular Muslim teacher tells the Muslim kids, make a stinja when you go to the bathroom. Akramakumullah. Make a stinja. You're teaching the kids to be extreme. By teaching them normative Islam. Girls sit over here, boys sit over here. You're one of those teachers, you're extreme. You're radicalizing the kids. You have to mix them up. But in the Jewish schools, in the Christian schools, if they wanted to do these types of things, it is allowed. So I say that time has come, Ikhwani, for our community to become a bit more sophisticated and mature to tackle and to address and to deal with some of these issues. Those of you who are fathers, I would suggest you and your wife go back on that internet, contact these people, find out more of what's being said, because although it didn't happen to you yet, it didn't happen to me yet, it may be coming. I know people in Birmingham whose children have been taken away because of this nonsense. There were some other underlying issues, no doubt about that, because everybody has secrets. But because of this initiative, it gave them the opportunity to come in to look. And then they discovered there are some other issues. So many of us have those other issues that are going on. May Allah Azza wa Jal protect us, inshallah Azza wa Jal, give us the maturity and the taqwa and the capability and ability to step up to the plate to address these problems. And again, we want to just thank the brothers from this masjid and everybody, this brother for coming to make an attempt to raise our level of consciousness and awareness about this dangerous reality.
If you just have any questions, just raise your hands. And sisters, just write a note and put it in the bookshop, please. Obviously. The question was about the definition of terrorism. The brother asked that the definition itself is extremely broad, so how does that allow for young children, like 4-year-olds and etc., to get pulled up without parental consent?
Because the definition is so broad, that's why anyone can be encompassed by it. Now, in terms of parental consent, when we're talking about prevent, the public sector workers have to apply it, and then the parents get involved later. So in many of the cases, the children are essentially interrogated about their thoughts and beliefs without the parents already there. Because if they think that the parents are quote unquote radicalizing the children, then they wouldn't seek parental consent in the first instance, because they think the parents are radicalizing them. So in many of these cases, the children themselves get interrogated in school without the knowledge of the parents, and it's usually done by either their form tutor or the teacher, or by the safeguarding lead, which is generally one of the deputy heads.
What the children are more likely to get pulled up on is extremism, not terrorism. And the definition of extremism also has, that's very broad as well. They're both very broad, terrorism and extremism. Any more questions? The brother asked how the best way to deal with the situation in the case that he gets pulled up by the school or questioned due to his children.
Call Prevent Watch. My genuine call Prevent Watch. But what happens is, a lot of the time what happens is the parents go to the school to pick up their children at the school gates, and then the form tutor, the head teacher, the deputy head would say, you know, Mr. Khan, I just want to have a discussion with you today about what your child said in school. He said these things relate to Islam, for example. At that moment, you know that this will be an implementation of Prevent. Like I said earlier in my talk, the relationship between students, teachers and parents has changed drastically. Everything's under this veil of securitization about stopping these would-be terrorists from going off and doing something nefarious. So once you know that this is what they're going to discuss, say to them, I'd happily speak to you. Because if you say, I'm not going to speak to you, then they'll be more suspicious and they'll use this against you later on. So say to them, I'd happily speak to you, but I want a formal meeting where you send a letter to me, and with a date and time, and what the exact nature of the meeting is. Please, I implore everyone in the audience, brothers and sisters, do not have any of these informal chats, because they're building a fire on you where there's allegations that will be leveled against you that you're unaware of. In the 160 odd cases I worked on, parents will say to me, I had an informal talk, I had a meeting with the school where they said my son or daughter done X, Y and Z. And I always say to them, did they give you any official documentation as to that these are the allegations against your child? In every single case that I've had, they always say no. So I say to them, so how can you know those are the definite allegations against you? So then what I would do, draft a letter on behalf of the parents, say these are the allegations I think you have against me, can you clarify? And then I would ask them questions, turn it on them. Because like I said, they have safeguarding legislation which they have to adhere to. For example, the Equality Act, that they can't discriminate against your child because they're Muslim or from a particular ethnic background, whether it's Bangladeshi, Pakistani, whatever. Then I would ask for their evidence base as to what their evidence is for the allegations they're making. And I would want disclosure of all the information that they have from all the different public sectors. And thirdly, I would put in black and white terms, I don't want you to speak to my child without my consent concerning this matter. Once you have that chain of information, there's a formal way that that you're engaging the process and that you have dialogue. And with that formal process, there builds a paper trail and an evidence base which can support the case for you. And that's why it's very important to please do not have these informal chats.
I think that the issues of preventive symptoms or something that's already going on. Perhaps the government or the major society or the bigger society here is afraid of Muslims or what they believe. Is there a particular Islamic duty that we have that can help us in this type of situation?
The brother is asking that seems like prevent is just part of a knock-on effect as it relates to deeper underlying issue in terms of here people being against Islam and the society being against Islam. As I mentioned, the truth has to be said. I've traveled throughout Europe extensively, and I can say without hesitation, without apologizing, that Canada and the UK are the two most tolerant countries as it relates to Muslims on the planet, and Allah knows best. In terms of non-Muslim countries, Canada and UK, especially Canada. UK is tolerant as well, but there's a sense of hypocrisy there because UK, I think they want to rule the world. They always had that thing, the sun doesn't set except on the British Empire. So that thing is still in their mindset, where Canada is not like that. Canada was a country, didn't get involved in the Iraqi war. Canada is a country that tries to always be independent and away from being forced into things that America is trying to make it do. And the Vietnam War, many Americans who didn't want to go to the war, some of them went to prison, like Muhammad Ali, Shafa'ullah, and other people escaped to Canada. Canada let them in. So I think they're extremely tolerant. Here as well. Problem though, we didn't take advantage in a good way of that tolerance by spreading the religion, the beauty of Islam, taking advantage of the opportunities that we had in this country that they gave us. And I always tell our youngsters who were born here and grew up here, remember, Al-Islam is up and nothing goes over Islam. That's what the hadith said. Al-Islam ya'la, and nothing goes over Islam. But there's nothing wrong with being proud, for lack of a better term, being American, being Canadian, being British. Nothing's wrong with that. This is where we come from. We're not going anywhere. Don't treat us like second-class citizens. Anybody want to go, let them go. But we're here. We're here to stay. We are a vibrant part of the landscape. We're here to stay. But unfortunately, this extremism that we did, some of these incidents that happened, we gave them the ammunition and the fodder to do what they're doing right now. We gave this to them. We handed it to them on a platter, on a tray. And now we're dealing with the knee-jerk reaction that we see going on today. But again, in our religion, we have the answer to all the issues that present themselves. So in concluding that, I think right now it's not too late for the community to take our religious responsibility, our community responsibility, ethical responsibility to help the community, this country, move forward in a better way. Islam is not against that. We're here. When the Prophet came, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't denounce Quraysh, he didn't denounce his nationalism, he didn't denounce that he came from Mecca. This is where we are. He didn't go and try to practice Islam on an island by himself. He was in Mecca practicing Islam with the people in a hostile environment. He went to a place where he was able to practice his religion. When he went to Medina, he went into agreements and contracts and understandings with the non-Muslims. So that's the nature of our religion. It is a community religion. It's not something that we just live by ourselves, Muslims alone. No, we have a religious responsibility to bring good to the outer community. As he said, the best of you, khairukum anfa'akum linnas. The best of you is the one who brings benefit to all of the people. Not just to the Muslims, not just to the Arabs, not to the weak or the poor, but to the people. So our dawah efforts and just just being good citizens, man, we have a religious responsibility to live up to that obligation.
Can a person's social media profile act in evidence against them for terrorism?
Yes.
Any more questions from here? One second.
Question, not speech.
So in the cases that I discussed, none of them went to court. We did it via these letters. Once there's a clarification of issues, and once we get pen to paper as to what the actual allegations are, then we're able to nip it in the bud very quickly. We don't proceed to the courts because courts cost lawyers, courts cost time and money that most people in our community simply do not have. The letters that I draft are completely free of charge, so we're able to nip things in the bud very quickly. I'll give you an example. There was a child who's he's 8 years old, who went on a school trip, who wore one of these t-shirts that charities sell, like, they said, I want to be like Abu Bakr Siddiqui, right? This led to a trigger to prevent, because they said, oh, he must be Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, even though it clearly says on the shirt al-Siddiqui, right? And when I wrote to the school on behalf of the parents, the school corresponded back and said, we thought this 8-year-old was an ISIS supporter who supports Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And they still insisted that it was Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. I wrote back saying, how can you implement the prevent strategy and look at what so-called extremist Islam is when you do not understand who one of the most famous and well-known figures in our religion is? So they had to apologize and had to acknowledge that they were in the wrong, and social services and the school had to close the case. So we never get to the court stage. Now, if it does get to a stage where they want to do a child protection proceedings, where they think they have a strong enough case, then I would pass on the case to solicitors and they would get involved, and we'd no longer be involved other than in an advisory capacity. But in our cases, we try and endeavour not to go to the courts because it's costly, and we want to nip it in the bud as early as possible. Hope that answers your question.
Another thing that I find amazing as well, and I have to mention this, is the fact that the people who work in the public sector, like the doctors, teachers, the social workers, these people have been told you have to come and get training so that you can identify the signs of extremism. They go for 1 hour and a half, 2 hours of training, and they come out and they're experts. And right here in this masjid, we don't even know how to make salat. We're not experts about our religion. Aspects of the religion that are important to us, we're not experts. So in a 2-hour period, just 2 hours, this lady is on a level where they can look and identify this kid is on his way to being an extremist. Because suddenly, the month of Ramadan came, for an example, and he starts to look introspectively, and he slows down with his activities, and he just doesn't want to talk a lot. So it seems he's becoming anti-sociable, he's on the way to extremism. It's just really, it's a mad state of affairs that the issue has to be addressed, and these are the initial stages that we hope will do something about tackling the problem.
The question I asked about the social media is actually part of a two-part question. The sister's asking about, I'm sure we've all seen this when you get these kind of like debates between these hardcore ISIS kind of supporters, but really they're like 12-year-old kids sitting in their bedroom, and then you've got somebody else who's a bit more moderate, and they kind of battle it out on social media. She's asking about how to deal with these kind of situations. Obviously, as you clarified, it can be used in evidence against you. So what should a person do who uses social media generally?
I think you have as with anything in life, you have to use common sense. Debating people on Facebook, how much benefit is that going to have, since you don't know who you're debating with? Like Usamah said, it could be a 12-year-old who just for the fun of it is saying stuff, and you're debating him. You just have to be smart about what you post on social media, or what you post on YouTube, what you post on Facebook, Twitter, because that could be used as evidence against you. In a raft of the cases that we have, they always say, X individual posted a talk from X sheikh. The sheikh could be talking about the obligation of salah, but because that sheikh, he said in another talk that homosexuality is permissible, they would use that against you. Now, I would have no reason that if somebody put up a sheikh's talk who says homosexuality is impermissible, and then he spoke about salah, that for me would not be a sign of extremism, but that could be used against you. When it comes to issues of what Usamah referred to, issues of ISIS and things like that, you're not going to solve it on a forum on Facebook, so just be careful about what you say and use a common sense approach.
Sheikh Usamah, could you maybe say a few words about utilizing time on social media, debating about ISIS and Khilafah and these kind of things which we see every day?
It's the responsibility of the parent to be on top of what the child is doing in their rooms with social media and other than that, because again, what lies in the balance is whether your child may go to prison or not go to prison, whether the police come and kick your door down. And this is part of the religion. A competent father and a competent mother is going to be on top of what's going on. The competent father is going to be on top of what's going on in his household. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the bed with Aisha, and he got up very quietly, and he picked his shoes up very quietly. He took his cloak very quietly, and he exited the room very quietly. But she was awake, and she saw what happened, and he left, and she left after him in the nighttime. He went to the graveyard, and he entered into the graveyard. And she watched him, and she went to the gate of the graveyard without going in. And she saw him put his hands up, and he was making dua. When he came back, and he got into the bed, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he found Aisha breathing, and her chest was going up and down because she was trying to run before he caught up to her. And he said to Aisha, "Why are you breathing like that?" She said, "Nothing, nothing." He said, "If you don't tell me, Jibril is going to come and tell me." She said, "Well, when you got up and you left, I felt that you got up, so I followed you. I thought you were going to go to another wife's house, so my jealousy made me go and look at you, and I saw you went to the graveyard." He said, "That was because Jibril came to me, and told me to go and make dua for the people in the Baqir, and that's what I did." And then he hit her on her chest in a plain, joking way and said, do you think that I would not be fair with you?" So from the benefit of the hadith in Sahih Bukhari, and Imam Ibn Hajar brought 35 benefits from that hadith. From the benefits of the hadith, permissibility of the lady going to the grave. From the benefits, the virtue of going to the grave. From the benefit is how Jibril would not go into the room where Aisha was undressed. Many benefits. From the benefits is the husband knowing what's going on in his house. His wife is breathing like that, and she's breathing like that for a reason. So if a Muslim son came into the house and his eyes were glazed and he smelled a particular way, the mother and the father had to know that boy was hanging out smoking weed. He was drinking. They got to have some kind of idea. You can't live in a vacuum or a bubble far away from the reality. And this is what used to happen with some of the parents from the old school who didn't know what was going on. Their kids were doing all kinds of stuff, drinking vodka in the house. Mother and father don't even know what time it is. Right now, the mother and father, especially since many of us have experienced Jahiliyyah, we have to see the signs of what our children are doing. So, as it relates to this, yes, you have a religious obligation and a right even to go into your kids' stuff. And that's not considered to be spying, because you're the authority in the house. Your wife can't go into your mobile phone and start searching. That's not because you're the imam of the house. You shouldn't do that to your wife unless you have some reason. As it relates to the children and things like that, the religion is telling us, the Prophet's Sunnah is telling us, be on top of your children. Kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ul an ra'iyati. All of you are shepherds, and all of you are going to be questioned and asked about your flock and how you dealt with them and what you dealt with and what you did with them.
Just from an observation, I think there's two faceted back, for the lack of good word. Islamic schools are under scrutiny of what they're doing. The mainstream schools, Muslims are under scrutiny about what they're saying and doing. One thing I personally try to promote, and I want ideas how we could promote this more as the guys, mashallah, etc. community. The girls who went to Syria, the sister who did this week, or the people who left, whether Sweden or France, linked to UK home-based terrorists. Their background is actually not Islamic schools. They're actually from the mainstream schools. Something in the education there, they're suffering, and something's sprouting out. And where we, or people in Islamic schools, probably doing this prevent from a long time ago. That's why not many kids are in that domain, alhamdulillah. How we can promote this more? This is actually a good thing we've been doing. They have introduced something. But we've been doing this prevent for a long time.
One time I came from a trip, they stopped me in the airport, and I get upset. You know, I try to be in the middle. You don't want to be too aggressive, but you don't want to be too soft either, because they stopped me in the airport and they take out a pen and a paper and they started writing, asking me these dumb questions. And I was saying to them, hey man, you guys still writing with pens and paper? This stuff should be in the computer. I just came from a 12-hour trip. Now I have to go from London to Birmingham. You know, I'm not happy with this. So they asked me, okay, we want to meet you in Birmingham. They want to meet me in Birmingham in a hotel in the airport in Birmingham. I went, and when they came, I could tell what they were trying to get me to do. And I'm the imam of the masjid, the one who they consider to be radical and intolerant. So if they did that with me, what do you think they're doing with the people around me? That's why you have to be careful about who you deal with. Anyway, I told these people, and I think you brothers will understand when I say this, just what you said. I said, first of all, I already work for the government. You don't have to come to me to try to get me to rat people out. I already work for the government. In that, our religion tells us what these radical extreme people are doing is against our religion. And we're clear about that and vocal against what's taking place. But, as I always say, there's another side. You people are partly responsible for also creating extremism. So, as you said, the Muslims, the vast majority of Muslim masjids and madaris, vast majority of them are trying to eradicate this extreme strain. We have some people who are extreme, but the vast majority of people are not like that. So with that being the case, I don't think that it's wise, it's healthy for us to be on the back foot, always on the defensive, always apologizing. But instead, continue to do the work that we are doing, and we remember. It's just our job, guys, to stay the course. Just do the right thing. And Allah will cause the chips to fall where they may. It's not our job to stop them from doing this. You can't do that. It's not our job to arrive at the finish line. Just maintain the course, and then inshallah azza will come out on the other end in the best way. Hey, do you know one of the people from the public sector, like these doctors as well, they are part of the equation? So the Muslim man who has a bit of, in Birmingham, he was mentally challenged. He had a rash, and he was putting on his rash Zamzam water. And he said, Zamzam, the Prophet said, is for what you drink it for us. Got barakah in it. and he was reading the Quran and they do ruqya. That's from our religion. And he had a little bit of issues. They said it's a potential extremist, this guy, because he believes doing ruqya on his arm and his rash is getting him in trouble. Zamzam water can help him. Habbat al-Sawda, the zayt. So where does it stop? As for us, and that's one of the biggest problems, that the person in the public sector can be a racist, the person in the public sector can be ill-informed, person in the public sector, something could have happened to him that a Muslim perpetrated a crime against him, so therefore he wants revenge and exacts revenge on that child, you know, in this sadistic way. And as a result of that, all of this drama comes to the forefront. So if a Muslim happens to be in that case, then as we mentioned in this masjid and other masjids, whether I'm someone who is responsible to identify extremist characteristics in the child or not, as a Muslim, if I know there's a Muslim who's being extreme, she's about to do something, I have to go and try to stop that thing, circumvent it. Now the question and challenge is, how do I do it? I don't want to get him locked up. I want to help this kid to learn, hey man, you're about to throw your life away. So I'm going to talk to him. I see, no, that's not going to work. I go to his uncles, I go to his father, and I rat him out. I say, hey, your kid is doing this and this based upon that. That's not going to work. He's about to go and do something. He's going to kill people. I have a religious responsibility to stop that. Because if I don't, I'm complicit. I'm complicit with Allah, and I'm also complicit and I'm going to get in trouble. So in that case, as the Prophet said, stop your brother from doing, help your brother if he is oppressed or the oppressor. Well, we know how to help him if he's oppressed. What if he's the oppressor? Stop him from doing it. So if we find ourselves being questioned about a situation, or we take the initiative to give the authorities, this happened, that happened, that's part of our religious responsibility. But let it be built upon yaqeen, let it be built upon knowledge, let it be built upon surety, and not guesswork and speculation.
In terms of the public sector workers, I apportion no blame to the public sector workers. They're just being told they have to give due regard to this. Due regard means that, like all other health and safety risk factors, they have to acknowledge that it exists. But there is a massive movement in the public sector who don't want to implement Prevent. So the National Union of Teachers, the biggest teaching trade union in the country, have said they're going to boycott Prevent. The chairperson or the chairwoman of the General College of Practitioners has said that it is not the job of doctors to become part of the security state, so they want to boycott Prevent. So alhamdulillah, a lot of the people in the public sector see that this is a problem and do not want to implement it. Now for those who do implement it, the advice I gave before, that's how you should engage with it. And what you need to try and do is try and educate the people you know who work in the public sector and tell them about initiatives such as Prevent Watch to find out more information as to what they're implementing. And one final thing that I want to outline when it comes to the public sector implementing it. So there's something called the Extremism Risk Guidelines. There are like 22 factors that public sector workers use to assess whether somebody is extremist. And I'm literally going to read some of them out. So it's feelings of grievous and injustice, feelings of being under a threat, a need for identity, meaning and belonging, a desire for status, a desire for excitement and adventure, a need to dominate and control, susceptibility to indoctrination, a desire for political and moral change, family or friends who are supposedly involved in extremism, being influenced or controlled by a particular group, or relevant mental health issues. Now let's take any child who's going through puberty, who's becoming a teenager, all of them, or anyone who goes to university, they all feel the desire for a political and moral change. There's a whole movement on university campuses about activism. People change their groups, people change what their friends are. But these vague notions of what these factors are which display extremism are being applied wholesale. Another example is a desire for status, a need to want identity and meaning. Anybody who starts engaging in the deen wants to know their identity and meaning. So if somebody changes from one day to the next because they start learning the religion, then their identity and meaning changes. And if that's being used as a factor to display extremism, then, like I said, it's going to impact the whole community wholesale.
Take one last question.
So, basically what you're asking is, the Freedom of Rights Act, where can we access some information so that I can make that judgment or balance or want to implement an Islam in my family freely without activating some type of prevent strategy, especially for individuals which have already had these informal conversations with the school. You know, for me to be able to go to a school and say, I don't want my daughter to participate in school. I don't want her to participate in music class that encourage music, sexual innuendos. I don't want her to do all these things that, you know, they're going to take children away from me. How can I access some information? Let's say, even if they're building a report against me specifically, how can I go and ask them, I want to see that information which you're building against me?
Okay. So the brother basically wanted to know how would he find out information regarding himself. So again, something that we at Prevent Watch do is that, but you could easily do it yourself. So there's something called a subject access request. It's basically a personalized freedom of information request. So you download the form from the relevant website, you fill in the details, and the subject access request is where you check whether there's a criminal file on yourself. And that's one way of finding out whether there is a criminal file being built on you. From local authorities, it differs on how to access that information. So it could be a case that you have to write a letter and formally ask for any information regarding yourself or regarding your children has to be personally disclosed. But again, if you call Prevent Watch, we'd happily draft that letter for you. And the brother actually asked about taking his children out of music lessons. I actually have a case in which a 14-year-old didn't want to play instruments and didn't want to take part in music lessons any longer. And what happened was he was referred to Prevent. So these issues are happening wholesale in our community, and we have to insulate ourselves as best as we can in the most appropriate manner possible.
The whole basis and foundation behind this Prevent, I mean, we've all established now from listening to both speakers that it's quite absurd, this whole concept, the way that the government is seeking to deal with this issue of radicalization and extremism. But their basis, their foundation is that the sole cause of radicalization and extremism is ideology, not personal issues, not alienating of a society, not the foreign policy. They ignore all these other factors and they focus solely on ideology. And that's why if you go into a school and say that my daughter, I don't want her to participate in something which is perfectly reasonable, understandable, it will trigger this whole concept of ideology. This is to do with the person's ideology. They follow an Islamic ideology, it makes them an extremist, bang. So now you're on this conveyor belt, and it's called the conveyor belt theory of radicalization. So you're now on this has triggered you. So they'll say he's not violent, he's not a risk, he's not a threat, but he's a non-violent extremist. So now you've entered this conveyor belt. So literally, a mechanical conveyor belt, picture it. Non-violent extremist is put on this conveyor belt, and this conveyor belt leads down to where? Violent extremism. So just from believing that, for example, the Sharia, the Islamic legislation takes precedent over any other legislation, or in the penal codes of Islam, or something like this, this makes you a non-violent extremist who's on an automatic conveyor belt leading to violent extremism. And just because you have these beliefs, ultimately you're going to, at some point, run off to ISIS or commit a suicide atrocity or something like that. This is the foundation, the basis behind the Prevent. And of course, it's ridiculous. And everyone in here attest to this, because we all have this Islamic ideology, we all believe in Islam and what it teaches us, but none of us are planning to do any of these things. This theory is completely flawed. Just to summarize those points.